So it was back in about 2010, collaboration between our group in CNM and Jeff Elam's group over in Energy Systems invented this technique we call sequential infiltration synthesis, or SIS for short, which is really just a way to grow inorganic materials inside of polymers. And we had this spark of an idea just about 2 years ago that we might be able to use SIS to create a sorbent to soak up oil to deal with oil spills in water. And the idea is that we can transform polyurethane foam, like is found in seat cushions, into an oil sorbent by first doing SIS on it to put a metal oxide and all the little fibers that make up the foam, and then using that to bind very strongly some molecules that make it oleophilic, oil-loving, and hydrophobic, water-hating, so that you could plunk one of these sponges down on an oil spill in water and it'll soak up oil and not water. Before we ever went out and told the public what we were doing, we made sure to interface with legal and also with communications to put a plan in place to protect our intellectual property and also to build a marketing plan before those results were ever out there in the public. And it turned out shortly after we had this idea, the United States Coast Guard put out a funding opportunity announcement looking for exactly that, new ways to clean up oil spills in water bodies. And so we were fortunate to get a project funded with them, and that ultimately led to this thing that we now call Oleo Sponge. So after we had our results from the Coast Guard project, we were ready to start sharing it with the public in concert with that marketing plan that was developed with TCP and communications all along, so we could do a controlled release of the information. And we were fortunate that thanks to an AP story and some other stories that went out there as part of this plan, it went viral. And we had coverage from all the major media outlets that are out there. And that led to this unusual situation for Argonne where instead of us going out and trying to advertise our technology to the world, they're coming to us and asking us for more information and wanting to partner with us. So our hope is that one or more, maybe many more, of these inquiries that we've had come into the laboratory will turn into partnerships, CRADAs or other types of partnerships with these commercial partners to develop the technology from the lab scale to a manufacturing scale, and then to put it out there into various market spaces where it could have a real impact. And one of the obvious ones is to address oil spills, but we really believe that this can be a platform technology that can have applications well beyond oil spills. So at this point, everything seems to be unfolding as well as or better than we could have hoped when we started this whole process, and none of that would have been possible if we had not worked closely in partnership with legal, TCP, and communications from the very beginning.
So if you can go back to the talk, there are several things that Seth Darling mentioned: portfolio technology, platform technology. Can't you hear me? Yeah. A few things I mentioned: platform technology, more patents based on this patent. So I want to point out, some of the IPs that you can develop from the basic science can actually lead to commercialization, working with commercial partners, and that itself makes a virtuous cycle. So as Seth mentioned, now they are looking for partners to work with to actually make this process into a larger scale rather than what we have in the lab. So an IP can lead to more IP and collaboration, and that's the idea. And again, the basic idea here was we had unique capability in ALD, and that's what led to the first patent, right? So what we sell, what we work with the external partners is both IP as well as some of the basic capabilities, right? So just wanted to explain to you what is TCP's role in external engagement. So if you look at it, right, you have certain idea, you have certain assets, you have capabilities. You kind of describe that with your industry partner, you communicate that, and then you explore a potential partnership with an outside party, with an industry. We can help you at an early stage, but this is again, technology, your technology. You are an expert at it. Few people in TCP can't really grasp your capabilities. So a lot of times, really, the PIs working in the industry that carry on the initial burden and the initial business outreach. But once you have realize that there is a foundation for a partnership, and there is a semblance of an SOW, statement of work, surely you must engage with TCP, because we help you put on what is called envelope of contract around your statement of work and carry through the engagement and contracting process, right? So it's important. If you can engage with TCP early on, that's great. We can help you in certain ways, but definitely we help you close the partnership with your partners. So the three most common engagements that TCP or Argonne as a whole has with industry, those are the key ones. One is that we can license an IP, something that a commercial partner is interested in commercializing. And the other ones is, well, it's something which is not a full-blown IP. They can't commercialize it. They actually need to come back to the lab to build on it or get some more know-how. And so we do what is called a strategic partnership, or we can do collaborative. And there's small differences in them. And sometimes, very often, it's the industry which is funding, completely funding the work at Argonne. And sometimes DOE also participates in that work, for example, through SBV programs, through TCF programs, through GAIN programs. So keep an eye on that as well, because they are an important source of engaging industry with Argonne. I'll quickly run down the process. Once you've defined a statement of work, there's still a lot that happens before you can actually start working with industry. So let me just run down. The light blue shaded areas are TCP, and there are various other entities that are involved in actually contracting the process. So once you have statement of work with a division. You have to work with your partner, fill out a questionnaire which identifies who the partners are, whether they're foreign, whether they're local, US-based, what is their business, and basic information. Work with your division and a division finance person. You have to really create a budget. And that budget probably is you have to identify if you're going to use an equipment, how many hours you're going to work, what is the total cost, because remember, we are a non-profit company, but we do work on a full cost recovery. So the budget person will help you with creating the whole package. Once you create the whole package, if it's an SPP, the division person puts in what is called a Pearl. It's a system, the computer system that tracks the whole package. Or if it is a CRADA, then the division person works with SRO office, Diane Hart. She is the manager of SRO office at the back. She's part of TCP. Her office, they work with the division, and they put the package in Pearl. Once it is in Pearl, it goes through various approval process in Argonne, at the site office, and at the headquarters, right? So we work closely with legal. We work closely with SRO office. We work with the Argonne site office, ASO. And ASO interacts with DOE headquarters. The process can sometimes take time just simply because many people are touching it, right? It goes through EC review, it goes through CI review. Finally, when it's all done, right, there's contracts administration person, which is Bill Walsh's group here. They interact with the sponsor and come to a final agreement on all the legal terms, all the IP terms, that go with the SOW, with the partnership. Mark Lengeth here, he is the key part, and Pete Sloniak. They are the key part in Argonne Legal, and they work closely with DOE Legal, both at the Argonne site as well as in the headquarters. They kind of have a pulse of what kind of IP terms would be acceptable to DOE and would be acceptable to the sponsor. And he can describe in more detail on what goes on there. Any questions here? Right, so I just wanted to point out, and which Mark Lankith is going to talk in more detail about, is the foreign approvals. And as I said, right, we do need to have some semblance on IP terms and data rights before it goes to DOE approval. Just trying to go quickly through this. This is after the work has begun. Work begins only after the money is in from the sponsor, and you can do the work. This is the work that happened in the Oleo sponge from Sir Darling. Once the work is done, remember it's not end of the engagement. It's only the beginning of a relationship, and an initial work can lead to more work with the company, right? Important thing to remember in mind that after the work is done, what does the company get? They get IP, and they get data rights. Some specific situations, a company has such a specific process that other companies can't benefit from it, so they can develop a specific know-how. They solve their problems. And then, most importantly, they can build a trust and they gain an ongoing relationship. What I'll do now is pass on to Mark Langdon. He's going to talk about the challenges with foreign engagements.
Hello, and thank you. I know we've talked about foreign engagements in the past, and part of it's because they can be frustrating because there's a lot out of our control and there can be so much variability. What I thought I would do this time, though, is to kind of show you from a DOE perspective. This was kind of a slide deck with a few edits, which I'll point out, that we received at a local conference a couple weeks ago across all of the DOE labs. And the nice thing about this is just to appreciate that Argonne's not the only one that's going through some of these challenges. All the other labs are going through them as well. And you know, the good news is kind of also some of the challenging news. Argonne tends to have the most foreign collaborations of all the complex. And so that's good. That means we're doing world-class research and collaborating well with others, but it also means that we get lots of attention from DOE, and some of those reviews can take a longer period of time. You'll see kind of the broad spectrum. This is for the Office of Science labs of different countries that we do deal with at the Office of Science level across the complex. So there's a lot of different labs. The one thing you'll see, though, is a little asterisk. There are a few countries that are on a sensitive list, and those can take additional time. And we'll talk about some of the other things that can take additional time in a little bit. Yes? Well, there's a total of 155 in the last fiscal year. And so there's a lot of projects. I think what they're highlighting here is the ones with the sensitive countries. How many do we have? If you look here, this is kind of an interesting spread of kind of how much money we get in these foreign projects. And again, this is across Office of Science. But if you were to actually look at the Argonne spread, most of Argonne's tend to be either here in the smaller type projects where we do, IGSB does a lot of kind of, someone send me your dirt or whatever sample and we will study the genome of that. So that's for $5,000, $10,000. But we also have, on the other end, we have a lot that are quite extensive and large. When you look at some of our nuclear projects with foreign entities, we have some very large projects as well. Now, this one, we talked about some of the increasing sensitivity across the complex with the election coming up. DOE actually formalized this in a new policy that issued in January of kind of what is their review before they will approve a lab engaging with a foreign entity. One of the things you'll see right away is people say, well, my program manager supports that, and that's good, but realize there's 6 different groups in headquarters that need to approve each foreign engagement that a lab has. The other interesting thing is they clarified in the policy what is a foreign entity. And I highlighted a couple of key things. First, what is a foreign entity? It's incorporated under the laws of any other country. And so that's what kind of tricks some people. They're not familiar with it. You may be aware of Johnson Controls. it's based in Milwaukee, but for tax reasons, it reincorporated itself, I believe, over in Ireland to try to deal with some tax benefits from that way. Well, because of that, Johnson Controls is now considered a foreign entity and goes through the full foreign review. Similarly, any that's owned, controlled, or influenced by a foreign government, and we're still not quite sure what the scope of influenced is, but you can tell the DOE is taking a very broad, expansive review of what they consider to be foreign. Now, these are kind of the areas of interest that DOE focuses on when they look at these foreign projects in headquarters. And I highlighted the first four: sensitive countries, what is the type of technology. Some of it, if it's very basic technology, that probably isn't a big deal. But if what you're talking about is nuclear technology, well, that might be a lot more sensitive. What are the intellectual property terms, and how is this benefiting the U.S. economy? And so one of the things that has happened, why things are taking longer to get through these foreign approvals, is we're now having to agree upon intellectual property terms before the site office will even send it up to headquarters, which that serial process is now adding to kind of the cycle time. In case you're curious as to intellectual property with a foreign sponsor under an SPP, typically, does the class waiver apply? Well, the class waiver in which a sponsor gets preferred intellectual property rights, they can control and own your results, will only apply to a foreign entity if the program sponsor has approved it. Otherwise, title to any of your research stays with the lab. And so that's one of the things that needs to get sorted out pretty quickly in terms of discussions with the sponsor and with your DOE program early in the process. And so that's one of the reasons why we encourage you to talk to TCP and legal early if you're doing foreign projects. Similarly, there's kind of a standard set of intellectual property terms for a CRADA, where each party gets to own their employees' inventions. But if they get additional intellectual property rights, then again, that needs to be sorted out before it can go up for approval. This is, again, their chart, but just to kind of show you, all this takes place here at the laboratory. The site office will then send it out to these 6 different offices, and they all have to approve before the site office will let the lab sign the contract with the other party. And like, for example, we had negotiated an agreement with one entity, and they didn't quite understand. We tried to be upfront with them, but they didn't really quite understand after negotiating the agreement that we couldn't sign it, because that was when we sent it to headquarters, and it took them a number of weeks before they got back to us to let us give us the approval to sign the agreement that had been negotiated. I wanted to point out this slide. KPMG had done an audit of kind of the SPP process using FY16 data. This is an internal Argonne sheet that kind of talks about all the different process steps that are involved in getting through an SPP. And you can see from a domestic or foreign, for the most part, there isn't a lot of difference. There's activity in the division. The sponsored research office processes all their activities fairly quickly. But what you start seeing back here on the getting the work approval and getting the contract signed, those really go up for foreign entities. And I just want to, this was FY16, FY17, I think this is going to be even more pronounced, the differences. I'm going to shift gears. Instead of talking about SPP and CRADA, I'm going to talk about MOUs just briefly. They're also subject to, foreign MOUs are also subject to the same order, so same foreign entity, same approval parties. But an MOU is any type of document between DOE and a foreign partner. And so if you are ever thinking of doing an MOU, I would strongly encourage you to look at, we have an FAQ on a website. We have an LMS proc to meet kind of the DOE requirements associated with foreign MOUs. And there actually is a Zinc form that goes through kind of all the different approvals that need to occur to build the case to get DOE approval. But one part of that is this MOU questionnaire and that needs to be filled out, which you've actually have built into the zinc process. And the key thing that they're looking for is, you know, what is the benefit to DOE? How is this helping the U.S. government? How is this helping the U.S. economy? How, you know, they really want the person that is requesting the MOU to think about those and fill out, I call them little mini essays as to kind of why do we want to go down this path and enter into this MOU with this foreign entity before they approve it. And there's some historic reasons. There have been some issues with MOUs in the past at some of the other labs, but there really is a lot of interest in headquarters on MOUs. You'll see a similar type. All 6 need to approve it. The focal point in headquarters, though, is the International Affairs Office. So any questions? I know we were kind of a little behind schedule. I went through that fairly quickly because I know Pete has a really good group of people here to talk about on the next panel. But any questions in the meanwhile? Thank you.